Welcome to Dark Reddit, your late-night escape into eerie calm. I'm Alex, your host for tonight's journey into the shadows. Before we begin, find a quiet, comfortable place to rest. Dim the lights, take a deep breath, and gently close your eyes. Tonight's journey lasts 1 hour. 8 chilling tales told softly and slowly, designed to let your mind drift while the darkness unfolds around you. Let your body relax and allow your thoughts to wander. These are the kinds of stories you don't need to see. Only feel. You're safe here. Now, let the night begin. This story comes from someone who thought they were just signing up for quick cash, but ended up unlocking something that should have stayed hidden. I took a job from an app no one's heard of. Now I can't leave my house. I was 2 weeks deep into unemployment. Broke, stressed, eating peanut butter straight from the jar when the email arrived. No subject, no sender. Just a single message and a link. Real work, real pay, real fast. I should have deleted it. Hell, any sane person would. But desperation doesn't care about sanity. So I clicked. It took me to a page for an app called Grindstone. Sleek, black interface, minimalist white text, and a single glowing button. Start working. Out of options and nearly out of food, I tapped it. The first job was easy, almost absurd. Task: leave a 5-star Yelp review for Rick's Roof and Gutter Repair. Pay $10. They gave me the review to copy. I pasted it in, clicked submit, and within seconds, $10 landed in my linked account. Real money. That was the hook. Over the next 3 days, I completed dozens of small, weird tasks. Flagging strange videos, sharing obscure links, sending a pizza to an address across town with a handwritten note that said, "You made the list." Weird? Yeah. Illegal? Maybe. But I was up $1,200 in 3 days, and no one came knocking. Then the tone shifted. Task: leave a dead rat on the front steps of 1849, redacted Ave. Pay $500. I stared at the screen, unsure if it was a joke. A minute later, there was a knock at my door. No one was there, just a sealed cooler. Inside was a dead rat. My rent was overdue. My stomach was gnawing at itself. I walked 10 blocks, dropped the cooler, and left. The money hit before I made it back home. I told myself it was a prank, that I was just a pawn in some weird internet game. Then came the next job. Task: follow the man in the gray hoodie leaving the 24-hour laundromat on 6th. Take 3 photos. Do not be seen. Pay $1,200. I waited in my car for hours. Eventually, he appeared. Gray hoodie, soaked in sweat, glancing over his shoulder like he knew. I followed him 3 blocks, took the photos, uploaded them, watched him disappear into an apartment building. The money hit, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Then came the task that made me physically sick. Task: wait in the alley behind La Casa Cafe. When a woman in a white apron throws out a garbage bag, retrieve it. Do not open it. Do not speak to her. Hide it in the woods. Pay $4,000. I parked near the alley and waited. At 1:03 a.m., a woman stepped out of the back door, looked both ways, and tossed a heavy bag into the bin. Thudded solid, too solid for trash. I didn't ask questions. I drove it 12 miles into the forest. The bag shifted. Something inside moved. The app dinged. A thank you message. A smiling emoji. I tried to uninstall it. Wouldn't go. Factory reset. It reinstalled mid-process. Next task. Take a selfie in the mirror. Keep your back turned to the dark. Pay $250. I sat in the bathroom, facing the mirror. The lights flickered. Behind me, the shower curtain stirred like someone breathing behind it. I took the photo. My reflection was smiling. I wasn't. Then the app updated. Task. Look closely. I opened the photo. In the reflection, just behind me, stood a woman with no eyes. Her mouth stretched open in a scream that made no sound. Skin like old wax. Hair dripping wet. I turned around so fast I knocked over the sink. Nothing there. I smashed the mirror. I shut off the phone. Powered itself back on. Task. You've seen her now. You're marked. Introduce her to someone else. Pay their silence. The app now had a share button. I didn't sleep for 2 days. Kept every light on. Covered every reflective surface. Then came another task. She's getting closer. Choose someone. Fast. Timer. 6 hours. Panicked. Called my brother. Told him about the app. Said it was a game. He laughed. I sent him the link. He downloaded it. Took his first task. Record yourself sleeping. The next morning, I got a text. Why is there a woman crawling across my ceiling? Then, she's inside the walls. Then nothing. The app dinged. He was successful. She's found a new home. I smashed my phone with a hammer. Threw it in the river. Moved to a new city. New number. New life. Peace. For a while. Until a package arrived. No return address. Inside, a phone. Already on. Already logged into Grindstone. The screen lit up. Task. Your brother failed. She came back. You owe us. Task. Bring someone in. Now. Timer. 14 minutes and 59 seconds. I locked the doors. Covered every mirror. Hid in the closet. The timer's almost out. If you get a link today, no sender, no subject. Please, I'm begging you, don't click. If you thought that story was unsettling, wait until you hear what happened to this next person. It's been exactly 1 week since I opened that door, since the Wilson kids came back. I'm not even sure I'm still me anymore. I've lost time, hours, sometimes entire nights. I'll come to and find myself standing in different parts of the house. Last night, I woke up in the attic, shivering and barefoot. A crayon in my hand and the words helped me scrawled across the wooden beams. But the worst part, I don't remember writing it. Every mirror in the house is covered now. Not because I'm scared of what I'll see, but because he's still in there. The tall one. The one the kids whisper about but never name. I caught a glimpse of him once, not directly. Just his shape. Something about his arms. Too long. Bent the wrong way. I think the children are afraid of him because they didn't bring him back. I did. The night of the fire, I heard them scream. It wasn't just noise, it was pleading. A raw, frantic chorus of, "Help us. Please, someone help us." And I froze. I watched from my bedroom window, heart pounding, every part of me begging to move, but my feet wouldn't. I keep telling myself it wouldn't have made a difference. But now I'm starting to think that lie is what summoned him. The silence I gave them, the betrayal, he feeds on that. 2 nights ago, I saw the neighbor's kid standing outside my window, staring. I knocked on the glass, tried to shoo him away, and he smiled. His eyes were completely black. Not missing, not scratched out like the photos, just filled. Later, I checked the security camera footage. I saw myself standing next to him. I haven't left the house in days. I tried calling someone. Anyone. My mom. My ex. Even 911. But the lines don't work. They connect. Sure. I hear ringing. Sometimes even a hello. But it's my voice on the other end. And it's always laughing. The kids are bolder now. They don't knock anymore. They just come in. Walk around. Play with things. They drag toys across the hardwood in the middle of the night. Sing songs I don't recognize. Sometimes I hear a tiny voice say, "Shoo." He's watching again. I don't know if they mean me or him. Today, the shadows moved on their own. I was making coffee when I noticed it, the outline of a child on the kitchen wall, flickering like a film reel. But nothing was casting it. It just stood there. Then it moved, slowly, jittering from frame to frame like a puppet with invisible strings. I smashed the mug, ran upstairs, and on every wall, a message. "You watched us burn," written in soot. I found something else tonight, behind the drywall in the guest room. The knocking was coming from there, sharp, frantic, like fingernails on metal. I tore it open. There were toys inside, melted, warped plastic buried in insulation. A charred shoe, a teddy bear with half its face fused to the wood. But deeper in, I found bones, tiny ones, children's, and a note, written in my handwriting. "They don't forgive, and he doesn't forget." I don't know what he is. Maybe a demon, a god, or just a shadow born of guilt too heavy to bury. But I do know this. The Wilson kids weren't just victims. They were witnesses, and now they're tools, puppets for whatever crawled into this world through the crack I left when I didn't act. And that crack's getting wider. Midnight, the mirror's cracked again. It's bleeding this time, thick, black ichor oozing from the frame. I can hear something inside it like breathing. The lights are flickering harder than ever, and the air smells like burning plastic and old teeth. The kids are in the hallway. I see their feet under the door, bare, dirty, not touching the floor. One of them just whispered, "He's in your skin now." I can feel it too, like something's crawling under me, like I'm just the shell now, just the mask, and he's behind my eyes, waiting for me to sleep again. I can't let that happen. I drove to the church on Miller Street, the one that burned down last year. I don't even remember starting the car. It was instinct, desperation. The fire damage was still fresh, black walls scorched with soot, ash frozen mid-collapse like the building had been caught gasping. And in the very center of the chapel floor, drawn in white chalk, was me. Perfect outline of my body, arms spread, mouth open. Lying beside it, a children's drawing. Crayon again. It showed the Wilson kids smiling, holding hands. Behind them, a tall figure, scribbled in black. And in the corner, a house, my house, with red stick flames coming out of the roof. I didn't go home after that, but he did. This will be the last thing I write. I know that now. My phone turned on by itself. The camera activated. The screen shows my face, but I'm not moving, not blinking, just smiling. Someone just knocked at the motel door. 3 soft knocks. 2 a.m. He found me again. If you're hearing this, reading this, whatever this ends up becoming, do not open the door. Even when they whisper your name, even when they sound like children, because it won't be them anymore, and it might already be too late. If you thought that story was As you breathe deeper and sink into sleep, this next Reddit tale may just make your skin crawl. It was just another quiet night in the sprawling mansion. The kind of silence that seems almost unnatural, thick and heavy in the air. I was sitting in the living room, watching the flicker of the baby monitor that sat on the table beside me, keeping an eye on my client, Mr. Peterson. He was sleeping in his room upstairs, as he did every night. My job was simple. Stay awake, make sure he didn't get up and wander, make sure he didn't fall. He had dementia, and for the last 6 months, I had been his overnight caregiver, tasked with ensuring he stayed safe in his own home. It was a routine, but not one without its strange moments. That night, the house seemed unusually still. Even the creaking of the old floors seemed to have been swallowed by the vast, empty space of the mansion. I tried to focus on my book, the pages barely rustling in the silence, but my eyes kept drifting to the baby monitor and the still image of Mr. Peterson sleeping soundly in his bed. It was 11:11 p.m. when it happened. I'm not sure what made me look at the monitor at that exact moment. Maybe it was the fact that everything felt so unsettlingly quiet, or maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me, trying to distract from the eerie calm of the house. But as soon as I glanced at the screen, my stomach dropped. The blankets on Mr. Peterson's bed, which had been neatly tucked around him, began to lift. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light or some glitch in the monitor. But no. There they were, the blankets, rising slowly into the air, as though invisible hands were gently lifting them up. They hovered for a moment, suspended just above Mr. Peterson's body, and then, just as suddenly, they fell back down. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the screen, unsure of what I had just witnessed. The room on the monitor was still. Mr. Peterson didn't stir, didn't wake up. He was oblivious to whatever had just happened. I leaned forward, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Could it have been a draft? There were no open windows in his room, and his door was closed. It didn't make sense. A draft couldn't do that, and yet, there was no explanation for what I had just seen. I tried to shake it off, telling myself that it was probably just a glitch, or perhaps I had imagined it. After all, I had been alone in this massive house for hours, and the silence was starting to get to me. The house was so quiet at night it was almost oppressive. I had always felt a little uneasy in the mansion after dark. There was something about the vastness of it, the way the hallways stretched on endlessly, the feeling of being watched even when no one was around. I tried to focus on my book again, but the image of the blankets lifting wouldn't leave my mind. I glanced at the monitor once more, just to reassure myself that everything was fine, but the screen was still frozen on the image of Mr. Peterson sleeping peacefully. There were no signs of movement, no disturbance, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the quiet house. 11:15 p.m., then 11:16. I stood up from the couch and walked to the kitchen, trying to shake the growing sense of unease. I needed something to calm my nerves, so I made a cup of tea. The kettle whistled and the warm steam filled the air as I poured the water into the mug. I sipped slowly, trying to steady my hands, but every time I glanced toward the baby monitor, that image of the blankets lifting replayed in my mind. I couldn't get rid of the feeling that something wasn't right. I wandered through the mansion, checking the locks on the doors, making sure everything was as it should be. As I passed by the staircase that led up to Mr. Peterson's room, I felt a cold chill run down my spine. There was no breeze, no open windows, nothing that would explain it. I stopped for a moment, staring up the staircase, but all I saw was the darkened hallway above. Everything was still. Everything was quiet. And yet, something was wrong. I returned to my post in the living room, feeling the weight of the house pressing in on me. The silence had become unbearable. It wasn't normal to be this alone in such a large place. There were sounds, small creaks and groans, that I couldn't explain, like the house itself was alive and breathing in the darkness. I glanced at the monitor again. Mr. Peterson's room was unchanged, but something still felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that I wasn't truly alone. Just as I was about to pick up my book again, the lights flickered. A quick, sharp flicker that lasted only a second, but it was enough to make my pulse quicken. I stood up from the couch and made my way to the hallway, looking up toward the dark staircase. Everything seemed normal again, but the unease in my chest refused to fade. And then, as I stood there, I heard it, a soft thud, followed by another. It was coming from upstairs, from Mr. Peterson's room. I froze. The thuds continued, slow, deliberate. My heart pounded in my chest. I took a deep breath and slowly made my way upstairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. I reached the door to Mr. Peterson's room and hesitated before opening it. The door creaked as it swung open, revealing the darkened interior. The room was as I had left it. Mr. Peterson lay in his bed, still asleep. But then I saw it. The blankets, now back in place on the bed, moved again. They twitched, as if something underneath was stirring. I rushed to the side of the bed, my hand trembling as I reached for Mr. Peterson's arm to check on him. He was still sleeping, his breathing steady. But the blankets, they rose once more just as they had before. Gently, slowly, as though an invisible hand was lifting them from the bed. I backed away from the bed, my breath coming in short gasps. This wasn't just a draft. It wasn't a glitch. Something was in this house with me. I grabbed my phone and texted a friend, my fingers shaking. Something's happening. I don't know what, but I'm scared. The phone buzzed with a reply, "Call the police." I didn't know if it was paranoia or real fear, but I had no intention of staying in that house a moment longer. As I turned to leave the room, I heard it again, the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me. This story begins with an ordinary night that turned into something unforgettable. It was a cold night in the mountains of India, the kind where the air feels thin and the chill seeps into your bones. My aunt's ex-husband, Raj, lived in a small town known for its quiet beauty and its proximity to a popular holiday spot nestled in the hills. The area was peaceful, too peaceful, in fact. He owned a small shop in the town, and his house was situated a little higher up, perched at the top of a steep road that wound through dense forest and rocky terrain. It wasn't an easy place to live, especially during the night, when the only sounds that accompanied you were the whispers of wind through the trees. One night, around 12:30 a.m., Raj was heading home from his shop on his scooter. It had been a long day, and he was looking forward to the quiet of his home. But as fate would have it, The tire of his scooter got punctured just a few kilometers from his house. He wasn't too worried. He knew the road well, and it was a short walk home. So, with no one in sight, he decided to leave the scooter behind and walk the rest of the way up the steep hill. The path was dark. No streetlights to guide him, just the faint glow of stars above and the occasional rustle of leaves underfoot. As he walked, the temperature seemed to drop, and he felt a strange sense of unease creeping up his spine. The air felt different, almost too still, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Then, out of nowhere, Raj heard it, a soft ringing sound, like a bicycle bell. He froze, turning quickly to see who it was. But there was no one. The path behind him was empty. His heart skipped a beat, and he quickly turned back to face the road ahead. But that's when something strange happened. A figure appeared beside him, walking at the same pace. The man was unfamiliar, but something about him felt strangely familiar. His face didn't ring any immediate bells, yet there was something about his voice that sounded like someone Raj should know. The man spoke in a low, almost guttural tone, mumbling his words, his breath quick and shallow, as if he were out of breath or nervous. "Got a cigarette?" the man asked. Raj frowned. He used to smoke, but tonight he didn't feel like offering one. There was something about the request that felt off. Maybe it was the strange way the man was acting, or perhaps it was just the eeriness of the moment, but Raj declined. Yet the man asked again, and again, his voice insistent, his tone growing more desperate with each request. "I'm not carrying any," Raj replied, trying to brush it off, but the man didn't seem to care. He just kept asking, repeating the same question like a broken record. Cigarette after cigarette, he begged, his voice dragging, almost pleading. Raj grew uncomfortable. He tried to distance himself, but the man remained close, walking beside him. At one point, the stranger placed a hand on Raj's shoulder, like they were old friends walking together. It was a heavy, unsettling touch, as if the man's hand weighed far more than it should have. Raj didn't say anything, though. He simply continued walking, trying to ignore the strange feeling creeping up his neck. They were almost at Raj's house when the ringing of the cycle bell came again, this time louder, sharper. Raj whipped his head around, but once again, there was nothing. No bike, no person, just the empty, dark path stretching behind him. He turned back to the front, and to his horror, the stranger was gone. But the sensation didn't leave. The weight on his shoulder remained, lingering like a phantom presence, even though the man had vanished completely. Raj paused, his heart racing in his chest. The hand that had been on his shoulder was gone, but the pressure, the feeling of something heavy weighing him down, stayed with him. He could still feel the man's grip, as though the touch had left an indelible mark on him. Panic surged in Raj's chest, and he ran the rest of the way home, not daring to look back. When he arrived at his house, he was pale and drenched in sweat. My grandmother, who had been waiting for him, noticed immediately. "Are you all right?" she asked, concern in her voice. But Raj didn't answer. He didn't speak much that night. He went straight to his room, collapsed onto the bed, and tried to sleep, though the unease wouldn't leave him. The next morning, Raj woke up early, his body still tense from the unsettling events of the previous night. He decided to take a hot shower, hoping to wash away the lingering sense of dread. But as soon as the hot water hit his back, he let out a sharp cry, his body jerking as if electrocuted. He rushed to the mirror, heart hammering in his chest. There, on his shoulder, were deep claw marks, scratches so fresh and vivid that they seemed to glow under the light. The marks were jagged and uneven, as if something had dug into his skin with terrible force. Raj stood there, frozen, staring at the marks in the mirror. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what had happened, but there was no rational explanation. No one had touched him. No one had been there, yet the scratches were real. It wasn't just his mind playing tricks. It was something far more sinister. Locals in the area had their own beliefs about the supernatural, and they weren't surprised when Raj told them what had happened. They believed that spirits, negative energies, or what they called bhut, sometimes appeared in the form of familiar faces or voices, trying to trick people into trusting them. Spirits would ask for things, cigarettes, alcohol, or other vices, and if you gave it to them, they would drop it and ask you to pick it up. That's when they struck. It was believed that the spirits would either possess you or harm you. Raj had unknowingly fallen victim to one of these spirits. The place where the stranger had vanished, just a few steps ahead of him, was near a small temple. The locals believed the temple was protected by a powerful goddess, and it was likely the goddess who had driven the spirit away. Raj couldn't help but feel thankful for the temple's protection. But even now, all these years later, the marks on his shoulder remained faint, a constant reminder of that night. A night when the line between the living and the dead blurred, and a man walking alone on a dark path became the prey of something far beyond his understanding. And every time Raj looked at those marks, he remembered that eerie feeling, the feeling of being watched, of being followed, and of something far darker than he could ever imagine lurking just behind him. This story begins with a gift from above. But some gifts are heavier than others. It all started in 2023, a year that would change my life in ways I never expected. I had been carrying the weight of trauma since the age of 4, an event so intense that it led to a near-death experience, NDE. The scars, both physical and emotional, had been with me all my life, but I kept praying, seeking peace, hoping that one day I would find some resolution. It wasn't until the night of my son's 3rd birthday that the answer finally came, in the form of a vision that would leave me questioning everything I thought I knew. I had been listening to a gospel song late into the night, a song about Mary Magdalene. The soft chords filled the room, and as I sat there, the most incredible vision unfolded before me. I saw Jesus, his hands reaching out to my soul, gently bringing it back into my body at the exact moment of that traumatic event. I felt a warmth, a sense of peace I had never experienced. It was as if everything I had carried, every ounce of pain, was being washed away. And then came the second part, the unexpected gift from the Holy Spirit. It wasn't something I had asked for, nor was I prepared for it. But in that moment, I realized that I had been given a unique ability, a gift to help souls transition to the other side. It wasn't a gift that came with clear instructions or easy answers. I still struggle with it, and at times I feel overwhelmed by it. But I've learned to accept that this is part of my journey, even if I don't fully understand why it was given to me. The first spirit I encountered after receiving the gift was a woman named Bonnie. She had lived in our house long before we did, back in the 1800s, when the house was just beginning to settle into the quiet hills. Bonnie had been an indentured servant, her life one of hardship and quiet suffering. For 6 months after the vision, I could hear her thoughts in my mind, her voice soft and faint, like a whisper carried by the wind. And then one night I saw her next to my bed. She appeared to me as an amber-colored ball of light, but I knew it was her. I could feel her energy, her presence. She was scared, and I could tell she wasn't ready to leave. But I sang a Christian song to her, one I had learned long ago. and in that moment, she seemed to relax. Her fear melted away, and with a final, peaceful farewell, she left. She went to heaven, and I never heard from her again. I thought that would be the end of it, that my gift had been fulfilled. But the next day, something shifted. Something, or rather someone else, arrived. This spirit was different. It wasn't someone who had lived in our house, nor was it someone who had found peace. No, this was a spirit who seemed lost, angry, and confused. His name was Timothy, a young boy who had died in 1972 at the age of 15. His death had been tragic. He had taken his own life, overwhelmed by the abuse he had suffered at the hands of his stepfather. Timothy was the class clown, always making people laugh, always the life of the party. But behind that facade, no one knew the darkness he carried. No one knew the pain that had driven him to that devastating decision. I first heard Timothy in my thoughts. It wasn't clear at first. He didn't speak in words, but rather in jumbled thoughts that interjected into my own. It was as if his voice was invading my mind, pulling my attention away from my own thoughts. I could feel him, but I didn't fully understand what was happening. Then I began to see him, though not in the way you might expect. He didn't appear as a fully formed figure. Instead, he was like a wave of distortion in the air, a heat mirage that would flicker at the edge of my vision. It was unsettling, to say the least. But over time, I learned more about him. Timothy, it seemed, wasn't looking for peace. He was searching for something, but I couldn't tell what. He would often interrupt my thoughts, making it seem like his ideas were my own, as if he were trying to manipulate my mind. It felt like I was being bullied by him, even though he never spoke outright. It was the subtlety of it, the way he made me question my own thoughts, that unnerved me the most. Sometimes he would come to me at night, appearing at the edge of my bed. I'd wake up and see an outline of his body, distorted like the heat waves rising off a hot surface. At first, I was too frightened to acknowledge him. But one night, I couldn't help myself. When I saw his outline, I screamed his name, as if calling him out from the shadows. In that moment, my bedroom door creaked open by itself, halfway, as if to confirm his presence. I could feel his energy, his anger, his pain, and I knew that he wasn't ready to cross over. The hardest part of this experience is not knowing what to do with it. Most people, even those closest to me, my therapist, my husband, my mother, think it's a mental health issue. They try to be supportive, but they don't understand the isolation I feel. It's difficult to explain how it feels to never truly be alone in your own thoughts, to have voices from the other side constantly interrupting your mind. It's not just hearing them, it's feeling them, knowing they're there, even when they're not physically present. I pray every day for peace. I pray for guidance, for understanding, and for strength. I remind myself that this gift is from God, even if it doesn't always feel like a blessing. But there are moments when I wonder if I'm truly helping, or if I'm just being used as a vessel for something I don't fully comprehend. And yet, even with all the fear and uncertainty, I still try to help those spirits who need it. I may not have all the answers, but I know that this is part of my journey. I don't know why I was given this gift, but I trust that it is meant to be. I trust that somehow it will make sense one day. Until then, I continue to pray and wait for the day when the voices grow silent, when the spirits find their way home. What you're about to hear is a true scary story from Reddit, told just as it happened. My wife and I were blessed with twin boys. One of them, the older of the two by just a few minutes, was named after my late great-uncle. It felt like the right thing to do. My uncle had never met my children, and though we had no pictures of him in the house, I wanted to honor the memory of a man who meant so much to me. Little did I know, that decision would soon bring something into our lives that was beyond anything I could ever have imagined. When the boys were 2 years old, our bedtime routine was simple but comforting. Bath time, then laid out on their towels in their room to dry off and put on their diapers. It was the same every night, a ritual that soothed them after the hustle of the day. But soon after, I started to notice something strange happening with the son named after my uncle. While lying on his towel, he would stare at the corner of the ceiling and point. He'd smile, giggle, and wave. Sometimes he'd even laugh out loud as if playing peekaboo with someone who wasn't there. At first, I thought it was just a quirk of his imagination. After all, toddlers are known to make up imaginary friends, right? But the way he interacted with nothingness felt unsettling. My wife, ever the skeptic, brushed it off as just a phase. But the more it happened, the more I couldn't ignore the creeping sensation that something wasn't quite right. It wasn't long before I started asking him about what he saw. His answers didn't help my peace of mind. "Who are you talking to?" I asked one night as he waved in the air. "Baby sleeping," he replied, giggling. "Is the baby playing?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant, though my heart was starting to race. "Baby funny," he said with a chuckle. I was starting to feel uneasy. What made it even more unnerving were the times he'd say, "Baby eyes black," or "baby sad," or "baby crying." Every night, it seemed like there was something different. The baby was sad, or it was crying, or it had black eyes. Each description was a little more haunting than the last, and I began to feel like there was something more to this than just a child's imagination. Then came the moment that stopped me dead in my tracks. "What's the baby's name?" I asked one evening, half out of curiosity and half out of fear of what he might say. Without missing a beat, my son looked up at me and said, "Rory." I froze. "Rory," I repeated, my voice trembling slightly. We had never spoken the name Rory to him, not once. It had never come up in conversation, not even in passing. But a few months before the twins were born, my wife and I had gone through an IVF cycle. The pregnancy had ended in heartbreak, and we lost the child. We had already chosen the name Rory for that baby, a name we never shared with anyone, not even our families. The coincidence sent a chill through my spine. How could he know that name? How could he have said it so casually? A few weeks later, my wife wasn't feeling too well, so she decided to take a pregnancy test. When she came out to tell me, my son, without any prompt, walked right up to her, kissed her belly and said, "Baby mommy's belly." It was then that it hit me. He had known before we even did. He had no concept of pregnancy, and yet, there he was, confirming what was happening in a way that no 2-year-old should understand. How had he known? It didn't make sense. But at that moment, I didn't need an explanation. I didn't need logic. What mattered was that the baby we had lost seemed to be watching over our family, and it had somehow found a way to connect with my son. After that night, the baby sightings stopped. The strange interactions with the corner of the room ceased. It was as though whatever had been there, whatever my son had been seeing, had found peace. And in a way, so had I. A few weeks later, my wife and I went to visit my parents. I decided to show my son a picture of my late great-uncle, the man he was named after. I hadn't planned on telling him much about him yet, but as soon as I showed him the photo, he pointed to it and said, "Oh, baby. Hi, baby." My heart skipped a beat. The connection between my uncle, the child we lost, and my son seemed undeniable. It was as if my uncle was watching over him, or perhaps, in some way, had been the one guiding the lost soul of our baby. I couldn't explain it, but I felt certain that my uncle had been there with my son in the room, just as he had been when the baby had interacted with him. My uncle had a knack for making his presence known, and it seemed like he had played a role in helping the lost soul of our child find its way. With our family whole again, it seemed as if everything had come to a peaceful end. The visits from the baby stopped, and the strange occurrences faded into the background. It was as though whatever had been lingering in our home had accomplished its mission. But that wasn't the end of the story. Recently, my son started telling me about a new sighting. He had never mentioned it before, but now at night he keeps saying, "I see black owl." First, I didn't think much of it. Maybe he was just being imaginative, or perhaps he had seen something on TV. But when he said it again, with the same certainty that he had used when talking about the baby, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. A black owl? What could that mean? I didn't have the courage to ask him any further questions. Not yet. Part of me hopes that it's just an innocent thing, that maybe he's been chosen to attend Hogwarts someday. But deep down, I can't help but wonder if the spirits aren't done with him yet. Whatever the truth may be, I've learned that sometimes things don't need to be explained. Some experiences are too mysterious, too profound to be understood. But one thing is certain, our family is connected in ways that go beyond life and death. And I'm grateful for the love and protection that seems to surround us, even in the most unexpected of ways. Ready for another? This tale takes us into the unknown, submitted by a Reddit user who never looked at their house the same again. I had just finished a long day and was in the mood to unwind. My go-to method of relaxation? Cranking up the volume on my stereo and letting the music take over. It's how I cope with the chaos of life, blasting my favorite tracks, dancing around the house, and letting go of everything else. But this time, things didn't go according to plan. What I thought was going to be another carefree night of music and dancing turned into an experience that would haunt me for months to come. It all started with me dancing around my living room, enjoying the loud, thumping beats of my favorite homesick song. I was by myself in my element, feeling completely at peace with the music and the solitude. I glanced up at the TV, which was mounted high on the wall opposite me. It was a habit of mine, taking the occasional break from dancing to gaze at the screen, as though it could offer me some sense of connection with the outside world. But then something caught my eye. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, a figment of my imagination amplified by the music. I saw two figures standing on either side of the archway that led into my kitchen. They were only half visible, just silhouettes in the dim light, but there was something about them that made my stomach churn. They weren't supposed to be there. I squinted, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. But the more I looked, the more the figures seemed to shift, as if they were moving just outside my vision, making it hard to get a solid grasp on what was happening. It was like they were standing still, but at the same time, they seemed to be dancing. The movement was subtle, like someone lightly swaying to the music in the background. But they weren't supposed to be there. I was alone. My heart began to race. Was I just seeing things? Was I so immersed in the music that I had convinced myself there were people standing in my doorway? My mind scrambled for a rational explanation, but I couldn't find one. I had to know for sure. Without even thinking, I grabbed my phone and started recording. I wasn't sure if I was capturing anything, but I had to try. I panned the camera toward the doorway, trying to steady my shaking hands as I filmed what I thought was just a strange trick of the light. I continued recording for a few more seconds before stopping. I was still unsure of what I had seen, but I had to at least try to look back at the footage. My mind was racing, trying to put logic to what had just occurred. Once I brightened the video and played it back, I was hit with the truth. The figures I thought were standing in the doorway weren't just two people. The video revealed a much larger group, more than I could count, packed into the small space in the archway. And they weren't just standing still. They were dancing. They were having a freaking party. I could hardly breathe as I watched the footage play. The figures weren't clear, not in the way you'd expect people to look. No faces, no distinct details, but the movement, the way they shifted and swayed, was unmistakable. It was like a scene pulled straight out of an eerie movie. But this was real. This was happening in my house. I sat there frozen, watching the video over and over, unable to believe my eyes. There was no mistaking it. I had captured something that was beyond explanation. The figures in the doorway weren't just any figures. They were dancing, moving to a rhythm only they could hear, and they were crammed into the space like a gathering of spirits. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was a trick of the light, a weird camera glitch, or some optical illusion caused by the low lighting. But deep down, I knew better. There was something undeniably strange about what I had just witnessed. I wanted to share the video with others, but without the ability to upload videos here, I could only describe it to people. I hoped that in some other community I could post it, where others might be able to offer an explanation or even share similar experiences. The thought that I wasn't alone in this, perhaps there were others out there who had witnessed something similar, was the only thing that gave me any comfort. As I sat in the quiet of my living room, the music now silenced, I couldn't shake the feeling that something in my house had shifted. It wasn't just the eerie party of figures caught on video. It was the overwhelming sense that I had opened a door to something that was always there, lurking just beyond the veil. I don't know what to make of it, but one thing is certain. Whatever I captured on that video, whatever those figures were, they weren't meant to be seen. I'll never look at that archway the same way again. And I can't help but wonder if the party they were having was for me. An invitation I never asked for, but somehow couldn't avoid. This story begins with an ordinary day that ended in whispers in the dark. It was just another evening, a typical night spent packing as I prepared for an upcoming trip. My 4-year-old son was in the living room, quietly playing while I worked. The house was calm, almost too calm, as the gentle hum of the air conditioner blended with the soft rustle of clothes being packed into my suitcase. But then, out of nowhere, something shifted. My son, standing near the door, peered out of the tall window that framed the entrance to the house. His small face was pressed against the glass, his little fingers tapping lightly on the window. It was dark outside, but the porch light illuminated the yard just enough to make the surroundings visible. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice soft but clear, as if he were speaking to someone outside. I froze for a second, unsure of how to respond. "Who are you talking to?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly, though I tried to mask it with curiosity. He looked up at me, his big eyes wide with confusion. "Mom, who is he?" I glanced at the window but saw nothing. The darkness outside gave no hint of any movement or presence. "You're creeping me out," I said, trying to laugh it off, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. "I don't see anyone out there." I turned on the porch light, hoping to reassure myself, and continued packing. But the unsettling feeling didn't fade. My son, however, seemed completely calm, like this was just a normal conversation. I shrugged it off, telling myself it was probably just his imagination running wild. 10 minutes later, I returned to the door to check on him. He was back at the window looking outside once again. His face had changed. His expression was no longer playful or curious. It was full of fear. "Look, Mom, a skeleton!" he exclaimed, pointing towards the yard. I froze in place, a chill running through me. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice quivering despite myself. He pointed again, this time more urgently. "Mom, I'm scared. There's a skeleton out there." His voice shook, and his small hands gripped the windowsill. My heart raced, and I rushed to his side, looking out the window myself. There was nothing there, no figure, no shadow, no sign of anything unusual. Just the dark, quiet yard illuminated by the porch light. I didn't know how to explain it. "There's nothing there, honey," I said, though I wasn't sure if I was trying to reassure him or myself. Feeling a wave of unease, I reached for my phone and called my husband. I could hear the panic creeping into my voice. "When are you coming home?" I asked, trying to sound casual but failing. "I'm getting creeped out." As I waited for his response, my son went back to the window. To my horror, he began waving at the empty yard. "Waving at what?" I asked, my voice tight with fear. "I don't know," he said, still waving enthusiastically as though he was greeting an old friend. "Bye-bye, skeleton." My stomach dropped. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. Who or what was he seeing? And why couldn't I see it too? I turned to my mother-in-law, who was sitting nearby. "Do you think he's just using his imagination?" I asked, trying to hold on to some semblance of normalcy. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just imagination. There was something more to this. She didn't seem as concerned as I did. "He's probably just pretending," she said, brushing it off with a nonchalant wave, but I could see the hint of uncertainty in her eyes, and I could feel it in the air. She wasn't a believer in anything supernatural, but even she couldn't ignore the strange events unfolding before her. Deciding to take a more direct approach, she stood up and walked outside, wanting to get a closer look for herself. But when she stepped into the yard and looked around, she saw nothing. No skeleton, no figure, no signs of anything out of the ordinary. She came back inside, still unconvinced. "There's nothing out there," she said, shrugging as she returned to her seat. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or even more disturbed. My son, however, was still acting as if everything was perfectly normal. He returned to his toys and stopped talking about the skeleton, as if it had never happened. But the feeling of unease lingered, gnawing at me like a quiet whisper in the back of my mind. As the night went on, I tried to dismiss it, telling myself it was just a figment of his imagination. But deep inside, something didn't sit right. I couldn't shake the feeling that my son had seen something I couldn't, something that didn't belong in the quiet darkness of our yard. I tried to ignore it, but every time I closed my eyes, I couldn't stop wondering, what if my son wasn't imagining things? What if there had been something outside? The next morning, everything seemed normal, but the memory of my son's words, the fear in his voice, and the way he waved at nothing still lingered. And now, every time I look out that window, I can't help but wonder, what was he really seeing out there? You've made it through the hour. The stories are over now, and the night is quiet again. Let the silence soothe you. Whatever followed you from the tales, leave it here. You're safe, you're calm, and you're already drifting deeper into rest. If you enjoyed these stories, consider subscribing to Dark Reddit for more nightly chills. Until next time, sleep well.